This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
significant and protracted
political theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Well, listeners of this podcast know that we talked to two of my colleagues here at Roll Call, Mary Ellen McIntyre and Daniela Altamari, last week to talk about the Roll Call Most Vulnerable Incumbents list. We're going to do a spin-off series of that. It's not a series, it's just a spin-off. And it's something that I thought of really completely on the fly. And that's what I'd like to just call for now, because it's so smooth, it sounds so good coming off the tongue, is the most not invulnerable list. And I think that when I think of constraints and concoctions like this, I just automatically think of my friend Nathan Gonzales to talk about a couple of races that we think we could classify as the political theater most not invulnerable of races for the 2026 cycle. Nathan, welcome back. Welcome back to Political Theater.
Yeah, I got nervous there because I thought you were just going to refer when you thought of most not invulnerable, you thought of me, and I didn't know whether that was going to be a compliment. I didn't know what to make of that, but that's okay. We're here. We're doing it.
I mean, we're men of a certain age. You start to feel you're not invulnerable anymore. So here we are. Two men of a certain age. I know you're much younger than I am. So
yeah, let's just go. We'll go with that.
Before we get started on this most not invulnerable list, and it's a small list, it's more representative. It's a little taster, if you will. I do want to ask you because again, I feel like we have to talk about Star Wars in some capacity. Ever since you wore your Blue Harvest T-shirt last year, sometime, or maybe it was even the year before, about Star Wars. So Andor, the second season, is currently being released on Disney Plus. This is people call this Star Wars for grown-ups. I always thought Star Wars was for grown-ups, even though I started watching it when I was a little kid. But okay, it's a great series. They also release it in batches, like 3 at a time, right? So it's kind of like watching a movie. And the first season of it was 2022. The creator of it, Tony Gilroy, is awesome. His movie Michael Clayton, I think, is still one of the better movies that's come out in the last 20, 30 years. But I have a confession, though, that I am, even though I love Star Wars and the world that it created for me, as a kid, I'm just coming to season 1 now. Wow. So I know, yeah.
These are confessions,
right? So you were saying, off mic before we started this, that you're not up on Andor season 2, but so where are they? Where are they now? They're like episode 10 or something like that already?
I believe so. I would have to actually rely on my boys because they've seen everything. I mean, they are so. I guess I still consider myself a they've seen. Yeah, they love digesting all of it, and so I'm not even sure where I'm of the age where I want to watch, but I usually end up falling asleep no matter how gripping. It is good. It is. I'm glad that you are entering this part of the Star Wars universe. It brings some texture to all the old stuff, Mon Mothma's story and stuff. Yeah. So without alienating everyone who's listening to this podcast right now.
No, it's also, I think it's political, and it's there are politics at work here, where this is, as people as you said, Mon Mothma, are trying to figure out how to push back against an emperor, someone who has made himself into a bigger figure than, say, the Galactic Senate would like, or at least some people in the Galactic Senate would like, and trying to figure out ways to constrain his growing power. So I don't know why I thought that this was relevant to discuss in the Political Theater podcast, but there you are. So where are you in season 2?
Oh, I'm halfway through episode 1. I don't even. Yeah, so I'm not that far behind you. Don't feel too bad.
Yeah, I just watched episode 7 and 8 last night of season 1. So he just went to prison. He went to the kind of an Alcatraz-like prison in season 1. So
I'm not sure it was ever a museum, but yeah, it's
right.
not a great place right now.
Have you ever been to Alcatraz?
No. No, I've been around it. I have never been onto the island.
Yeah, I went there for the first time. I've been to San Francisco a lot. Being a West Coast guy, you're a West Coast guy, but I went to Alcatraz with some buddies 2 years ago around this time in May of 2023. It was the first time I'd ever been there, and it was cool. It was interesting. It's not in particularly great shape right now. It would take a lot to, I think, convert it from being a museum. And then, I was getting ready to come back to San Francisco and a bird pooped on me. So I guess that's good luck. I don't know. People are like, what? When are they going to start talking about actual politics? It's all there. Alcatraz, Mon Mothma, Galactic Senate.
Before you see it now, before it's not available anymore. I guess you could maybe go to Alcatraz later under the refurbished. It'll just be under different circumstances.
Yeah. So let's talk. Let's pivot then from the Star Wars podcast that we've concocted here, and move to the politics of the United States. That's not Julie Mason's show. This is not Julie Mason's show. I'm Jason Dick, not Julie Mason. Shout out to Julie though. I love her. But let's talk. We're going to talk about 3 races, and the conceit that I had on this, and I'm glad that you're willing to play along and at least humor me on it. Is these are not like the races that are the top end targets for either party, but they, under the right set of circumstances, they could go the other way. This would be evidence of politics moving out of this sort of trench, warfare that we're in now, where they're kind of, each party is fighting over like literally a handful of seats in the House, and it's a little bit more out of reach for Democrats in the Senate because Republicans have a 53 seat, majority, and then they have a pretty favorable map in 2026. But in the House, I mean, things can. It looks like we're in for another tough fight, for the majority either way. But who knows? Things can happen, right? If the economy goes sideways, if there's something like a war that happens. I mean, these things have ways of scrambling the political calculus. And I want to talk about some of those races where these are all favored for the current party who holds them, but they could be in danger if something really crazy happens, or something that we don't see, or something that is, if it turns into like a wave kind of election.
Right. And these are, I would also categorize every cycle, people, what are the surprise races? And say, well, if it was a surprise, if I told you what a surprise race was, it wouldn't be a surprise anymore. But at this stage of the cycle, I think we're trying to identify places that under certain circumstances could be competitive, where we normally are dismissive of that particular race or that particular district.
Right. So let's start with Pennsylvania 1. This is Brian Fitzpatrick. This is not Ryan Fitzpatrick, former Washington football team and everybody else, Buffalo Bills, Jets. Ryan Fitzpatrick, the quarterback. I think he played for like 900 teams, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
that's the precise number.
It's Brian Fitzpatrick, who is he's been there for a while now. Was it 2010 that he first won? I mean, he succeeded his brother, Michael Fitzpatrick. This is Bucks County. This is right outside of the Philadelphia, kind of often contested race, particularly at the presidential level. But Fitzpatrick is pretty popular with his constituents. I remember when we were covering the 2016 Democratic convention, you went out there to talk to voters, and even though that was looking good for Hillary Clinton, and she did win like that district or the version of it that existed in 2016. It's different with redrawn lines, but Bucks County, went for her, and it stuck with Brian Fitzpatrick, who again, he's just built a brand that goes beyond his name too. He's former FBI agent. He is good with constituent services. So let's talk about this race, and because part of it is that it's kind of in the news now because Ruben Gallego, Democratic senator from Arizona, my home state, went up to Fitzpatrick's district on Saturday to hold a town hall, which Democrats are doing in the absence of town halls or in-person town halls from a lot of Republicans, just to talk, just to hang out with people from Philly.
Yeah, why not? Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagle fans. So Fitzpatrick always makes some initial lists because he is a Republican who represents a district that the Democratic presidential nominees usually carry. So in 2016, Clinton carried the district narrowly with 49%. In 2020, Biden carried the district with 52%. In 2024, Harris won the district narrowly with 49.7%. But he's not often in the top. Fitzpatrick isn't in the toss-up categories because he has that strong brand that he's cultivated over many years. And so we have it currently rated as likely Republican. And those two things seem weird, but it's because of his brand. The reason why we're talking about it on this episode is because if things get sideways, or really if there is a voter backlash against Republicans and how Republicans have performed over the 2 years, to 2025 and 2026, then Fitzpatrick could find himself in a vulnerable race, and it probably won't be because of something he has done, but just having an R behind your name, being connected to the Republican brand at a time when voters might be looking to send more Democrats to Washington to be that check and balance on President Trump. And so, when you look at the Democrat who's in the race right now, Bucks County Commissioner Bob Horvey, he's also a former high school social studies teacher. You might not be, oh wow, this is a knockout, top tier candidate, which he may end up being, but this race, under certain circumstances, it may not be about even Fitzpatrick or about the Democratic nominee. It's about voters sending a larger message. So that's why it's something to watch as this cycle develops.
And yeah, I think his district is just one of 3 that's represented by a Republican where the district voted for Harris in 2024, right? It's him, Mike Lawler, who is on the roll call most vulnerable list, and Don Bacon, who's also on the most vulnerable incumbent. Fitzpatrick is not on that most vulnerable list, but it's also interesting that there will be a few things that come into focus about his record. So it maybe, like, I would amend your statement that it's not necessarily what he does, but if he does vote for something that, say, kicks a bunch of people off Medicaid, or votes for a package that doesn't do anything to the to raise the limit on the state and local tax deduction, which this is a big issue in high tax states, particularly in the East Coast, where he's I think he's among the people who have been like, the salt deduction should be raised, and part of it is that it's a wealthy county. It has a high number of wealthy people and a high number of people who have like expensive houses, and like they don't get to part of the 2017 tax law that the Republicans are looking to extend through the reconciliation process is it lowered that deduction level. It used to be way more generous, and now it's capped because they want everybody to take the standard deduction. Sorry, this you thought this was a Star Wars podcast. This is a tax policy podcast. But I mean,
Lehrman.
But he could find himself in trouble with some of the votes that he's going to be asked to take in the next few months. I mean, I know that people don't tune in to super granular things, but like if all of a sudden a bunch of people are kicked off of their health care, that can be a motivating factor to vote in the following year.
And people such as Fitzpatrick and Bacon and Lawler, they're in a tough spot because the Republican majority in the House is so narrow that Speaker Mike Johnson can't afford to have very many Republicans take a walk if they want to pass something. And the president is pushing for what everyone now is calling the big beautiful bill,
call it a B cubed. I can't stand saying it anymore. Big beautiful. It's so cultish, to hear that all the time. Yeah. I'm going to call it B cubed.
B cubed, and that is it could catch on. We'll see if people heard it here first. But President Trump is not going to face voters in the 2026 elections. It's going to be people like Brian Fitzpatrick, and others who are going to face voters in the midterm elections and have that accountability electorally that Trump is not going to face in the midterms.
Right. All right. Let's go down to Newark International Airport and catch a flight to
taking off from Newark right now. I thought Newark, they're not really flying out of Newark anymore, but this is not a transportation podcast though. So let's talk about another race that you and I think is pretty representative of this, representing this kind of reach sort of district. By the way, for those of you watching this on YouTube, you see behind me Nathan's own map, the 2024 election results, color coded. For those of you, you're in for a treat. On YouTube, I'm going to point to the Fitzpatrick district, and then I'm going to point to the Ruiz district, just as an added bonus for making Google richer, by watching this on YouTube. Fitzpatrick district is all the way here. Right? That was good. That's where the magic's very
made,
precise.
Right?
Yeah. And then we're going to talk about California's 25th district,
which is right here, and that is the Imperial Valley, right, of California, and it's represented by Raul Ruiz, who is a former MVP of the Congressional Baseball Game, and a doctor, and somebody who is been. I wouldn't say who knows, using terms like comfortably reelected, but he's been reelected pretty consistently. He seems pretty popular. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, last year, he got reelected last year, but Trump won his district in 2024, and it was the first time since 1988 or something like that a Republican had won the district. That raised a lot of antennas, I think, for both Republicans and Democrats that wait, what? And also kind of indicative of some of the shift of Hispanic voters to Trump on the 2024 ticket. So Ruiz seems popular like Fitzpatrick, but warning sign must be going off for his campaign. And also the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, must be sort of salivating at the thought of having a target that they did not anticipate for years.
Yeah, and Ruiz, with his comfortable reelection margin, it was a surprise when we added him to our initial House ratings of the cycle in the likely Democratic category. But it was because of that shift at the presidential ticket, going from Biden winning it with 57% in 2020 to basically a dead even district in 2024. And that's because of the change in the Hispanic vote. And one of the it's still so much of a reach that Republicans today, we're recording on, what is today, Tuesday, Republicans released, they were targeting two districts in Texas and New Jersey's 9th district, where Nellie Poe is running as their kind of Hispanic reach districts. They don't even include this Ruiz district, but I think it is worth watching because of that shift. But it's also going to be a good indicator of whether the Trump coalition or the Trump voters are transferable to Republican candidates when Trump isn't on the ballot in these midterm elections. I'm actually a little bit skeptical that transfer is going to be as easy as what Republicans think it's going to be. I think the trend might have a temporary halt or hiccup in shifting toward Republicans because Trump isn't there to uniquely draw in those voters. Right. But I think it's a district to watch.
And one of the reasons I like talking about these two districts is it would be difficult to find two districts that are more divergent, in terms of where they're at. Bucks County and Pennsylvania 1 is this beautiful suburban, leafy, lots of golf courses, lots of cute cafes, nice houses, all this kind of stuff. Four Seasons. This is the East Coast that I imagined was always the East Coast when I was growing up in the West. It's wow, this is just so beautiful and it's so great. And then you get to California 25, and this is where like this is generally the area. Here comes another Star Wars reference where they filmed Return of the Jedi. Because it's like this is what a desert planet would look like in Tatooine. It's also, I think, where like Patton trained his tank corps before going to Africa. Because it most resembled the Sahara Desert. It's also got a lot of farmers. It has a lot of farming. Imperial Valley. It's a different planet than Pennsylvania 1, but again, the politics of it are just fascinating. That it's so wildly divergent. It's the same country, but it's just like so different.
And it's hot. In college, I went to school in Orange County, so obviously further toward the coast, but my weekend job was standing on a street corner. The politically correct term is human directional, but I had one of those large plastic arrows that I was twirling on the corner for new homes, because there was a lot of track home, a lot of development out in Riverside County and in the high desert. It's hot. It was hot.
And that's more the much more populated part of the district. It's obviously closer in. Yeah. There are suburbs in Riverside. There's a university, UC Riverside, and so forth. It doesn't all look like Tatooine, but it does. But it's quite a big part of it. Yeah, and it's on the border too. It's a border county. Also, another again. We're losing people by the buckets here, but another film reference. Have you seen Thunderbolts?
No.
Okay, so there's a significant part of it that's about sign twirlers.
Really?
So yeah. So I saw it over the weekend with Fawn, my wife, whom you know. We saw it at the Alamo Drafthouse in Crystal City, and they do like a little pre-programming before the show, and sometimes it makes sense exactly what is going on that they're doing. They'll show like say a commercial from the 70s or something like that like is vaguely related to the story or the characters. When we walked in, because it starts 30 minutes before the show starts, it was the 2024 Las Vegas Sign Spinning Championships.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly, and that actually does relate to one of the characters in Thunderbolts, but you just got to see the movie because I'm not going to spoil it. But okay. I'm glad to know that you were a sign spinner too.
That wasn't bad. It wasn't the best, but I wouldn't have won a championship. There were no championships back in the day. It was just about survival.
Right. Did you do breakdancing with it or stuff like that?
I wouldn't call it breakdancing. I could do some tricks. I could do some stuff. I mean, when you're out there for 5 hours, 6.5 hours a day, you're going to learn to do some stuff.
I'm glad you stayed hydrated, because that's a really good way to die out there. Is just being out in the hot sun for 8 hours and not drinking any water in Riverside.
I didn't know I was going to spend so much time in Temecula in college. Yeah. But
also, we've known each other for 14 years now, and this is the first time hearing of this. See, you learn something new, even about people you've known for long periods of time, all the time.
It's amazing. Yeah, it was great. It paid pretty well, but for a college weekend job.
Does Ruiz have a Republican opponent yet? Back to politics, by the way.
Yeah, that's a great way. I don't think there is one of note. So it's there's obviously work to be done.
All right, then the last race that we'll talk about is the trilogy, if you will. This ends the trilogy of our inaugural most not invulnerable list for political theater. Is the Texas Senate race. Now, caveat here, John Cornyn, who is the Texas Republican senator who is up for re-election in 2026, is on the roll call most vulnerable list as an incumbent. But the issue there is that he is most in danger from, at least at this point, of being defeated in a Republican primary. His most prominent opponent being Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, and somebody who has a very high profile and is very aggressive and raises gobs of money and is very much a favorite of the MAGA crowd. And President Trump has said that he likes both of them. So maybe we'll get that thing that I didn't even realize was a thing until Trump came on the scene, which is a double endorsement.
Well, there was the double endorsement in Missouri that my colleague Jacob Rubashkin, who's been on this podcast, remember Missouri where Trump endorsed Eric and there were two Erics in the
Right.
race, Eric Schmidt and Eric Greitens. And it may or may not have originated from a tweet that Jacob had just sort of offhand. But anyway, so it's not, there is somewhat similarity, but the warning sign.
And so, it's right now, like the rating is solid Republican. Like we're not expecting this to be a competitive race in the general. It's just that Cornyn himself is vulnerable, but we expect this. I mean, all signs point to this being a Republican seat in 2027, but
but these are the ingredients for a Democratic victory, right? What are the ingredients? The ingredients are a polarizing Republican nominee. Ken Paxton qualifies as that. You would need extremely high Democratic turnout, which in a midterm election, when the president and Republicans are maybe being too aggressive, then Democrats are going to be excited. If independent voters flip, meaning they switch their alliance or allegiance from Republicans to wanting to see more Democrats, and then if Republican turnout is depressed or is not as high, then those start to be the ingredients that Democrats need, because Democrats haven't won a U.S. Senate race since Lloyd Benson's 1988
in Texas, you should say.
In Texas, 1988 re-election, which was 5 years after Return of the Jedi came out the first time. I mean, it has been a while.
Always comes back to Star Wars,
And this is but the challenges of Texas is a good microcosm of the challenge Democrats have in winning back the whole Senate, because they need to gain 4 seats. The first 2 are, Maine and North Carolina, neither of which are going to be particularly easy. And then they have to win in some Republican areas. Texas might be one of those.
Yeah. And there are so many House races, in Texas, it would be difficult to encapsulate even a couple as representative. But like this, the other thing that happened with in 2024 was we saw a lot of what we previously thought of as more like strongholds for Democrats, particularly on the border and so forth, like move towards the Republicans as well. So, I mean, this is like, this adds to the Republican advantage, because they've always been able to get turnout among, the more rural and white wealthier areas of suburban Texas and so forth. But they had a strong, base of support in places like Austin and Dallas and Houston, and then also along these border counties. Now that those border counties and some of those sort of far-flung areas that they hadn't thought about in years are trending Republican, or at least trending towards, Trump, like it makes it all the more difficult for them to even hold serve sometimes. I mean, like in the House too.
Right. And the warning bells for Cornyn really went off recently when Senate Leadership Fund, who wants Cornyn to win and is supporting Cornyn, put out a poll. This poll was conducted April 27th to May 1st, and it had Paxton ahead of Cornyn in the Republican primary, 56-40. Again, wow. This is a poll that put out by people who want Cornyn to win, right. And it's going to be difficult. But then that puts in the general election in play. But Democrats are still wrestling with multiple very high profile, expensive Texas races that have not gone their way. The Republicans have won. And so do they want to invest again? If Paxton is the Republican nominee, I think that you'll see Democrats get involved yet again in a big, expensive Texas race.
And also the two Texas Democrats who thought that they had a chance and ultimately lost, Beto O'Rourke in 2018 against Ted Cruz, and then Colin Allred, who took on Cruz last year. They are among the names being mentioned. So it's, I mean, just they may have some advantages. Again, they've got like great fundraising, networks. They've got high profiles, but when people who have lost are running again, that doesn't send like that rarely works out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can. I mean, sometimes, and particularly in a big state like Texas, you might need to have a couple bites at the apple in order to build your name ID, and just the circumstances change, right? I mean, running in a presidential election with Trump at the top of the ticket, I'm talking about Allred, could be very different than a midterm election with a Republican president, when the mood and the political environment could be very different. So every cycle, I think I write a column for Roll Call that says Congress is filled with losers, and people get all upset and they're like, "What are why are you being so mean?" And they're like, "Well, no, just read it." But the point is that there are plenty of people who lose races before they win races.
They're character building contests. So
John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, is a good example of losing a race, losing a high profile Senate race before winning one.
Right. And also I think the most recent version that you did of this was that the cabinet that President Trump's current cabinet is filled with people who lost races. Kelly Loeffler and so is one of the examples. That. So anyway, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think also this has very little to do with the ultimate result in 2026 necessarily, but it'll just be amusing to watch. Is that by all indications, Cornyn and Paxton hate one another. It's not even close. It's not like a dislike or a distance or a whatever. They seem to loathe one another bitterly, which could always make for a really good contest, right?
And Senator Cornyn is in a really tough spot right now, right? Meaning he is facing the prospect of maybe losing to someone that he hates in a primary. But if he decides not to run for re-election, then it looks like he's giving up or giving in to that. And I don't know. We'll see what he ultimately decides. And we're not saying the race is over, but Cornyn is in a very tough spot right now.
Right. Before we talk about the word of the week, which I'm very excited about, let's talk quickly about your Trump 2028 column. Speaking of columns that get a lot of attention, in which you basically say hey, let's stop pretending that Trump isn't running for a third term right now.
Yeah, he's raising money. He's complaining about people interfering in a campaign. He has campaign merchandise, hats that say Trump 2028 on it. He's running. I think he is running until someone tells him, or until he decides not to, or someone says that he can't. And that's what in February, I wrote a column about how I'm not talking about constitutionally. People say, okay, according to the Constitution, he can't run again. But I'm thinking through, if he decides to run and it looks like he's running, who or what is going to stop him and when? And I think he is just pushing the envelope. He's pushing limits all across the board until he gets enough pushback to back up. And right now, he's not really getting much pushback on anything. So I think he's running until proven otherwise.
Go to it on rollcall.com. It's a good read. All right. The word of the week is something that is getting back to tough votes that Brian Fitzpatrick might have to take, or Raul Ruiz. Actually, probably is not as tough of a vote for him. But the Republican reconciliation package. I hesitate to call it a budget because it's really just a set of legislative priorities that you get to pass, without having to worry about a filibuster. It's very little to do with actually setting the budget for the United States. But this week, there are some high-profile markups taking place that will eventually make up what will be a reconciliation bill for the budget. So this week's word of the week is markup. It's basically just a meeting or a series of meetings, sometimes referred to as a business meeting up on Capitol Hill by a committee or a subcommittee, and members, what they do is they mark up the bill. They propose amendments, they change language they don't like, they try to, and then once these amendments are adopted, then it goes into a bigger package for legislation. In this case, it goes into reconciliation instructions that will eventually be folded into a bigger mega bill, the B cube, if you will. But markups happen all the time with other pieces of legislation, and the committees adopt them, and then they have to go to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee says yes, we'll let that one happen, and we'll let that one happen, and maybe not. Maybe we don't like this one. Maybe this caught us off guard. But that's procedural stuff for another time. So that is markup, the word of the week, and those markups have been happening for the last couple of weeks, and they're happening this week too. And we're covering them for CQ and Roll Call. Before we go, Nathan, plug your podcast.
Yeah, after you are done listening to every political theater podcast, come check us out over at the Inside Elections podcast with myself and Jacob Rubashkin, and we always have a fun guest. And at the end, we put the things that aren't political at the end of the podcast, if that tickles people's fancy, rather than at the beginning like we do here with you, Jason. But that's all right.
I'm just a contrarian. I live my life in opposition to everything you and Jacob do. That's my goal in life.
and it's gotten you pretty far so far. So congrats.
Look at this. Can you argue with success? Look at all this. Again, thank you, Nathan. Thank you very much for talking about this, and we'll catch you all later. Thanks for listening, all of you listeners out there or viewers. Again, if you're on YouTube, you can see this beautiful map behind me here in the podcast studio. Until next time, we'll see you.